time once again to discuss things.
So I keep those in a couple of on my bookshelf. So I consider getting those, but I don't know what I would put in this because I already put stuff on the show.
Alright. Well, you want to go ahead and get started then?
Sure.
Alright. Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I am Sid2. Joining me today is Jacob Carlson. Hello, Jake.
Hey, what's going on?
Not much, but we are continuing our reviews of Geoff Johns' The Flash. We had like 1, and then there was a really long time till 2. Then we did 2 and 3 really close together. Now it's going to be a pretty long time till we get to 4. So, sorry about that, guys. It's just, I don't know, how it happened. What can you do? Anyway, so Jake has picked this, and I'll let you kind of steer the conversation. Where do you want to start with this?
I think where I want to start with this is probably the art, because jumping into issue 2 of 1, which is the first issue of this after Scott Collins left in issue 200, I think that the art is the thing that people are going to find most, distinct, and the thing that's going to distinguish these stories of sort of Geoff Johns' era Flash from anything else.
Mm-hmm. And like the first artist on the first arc is Albert Dose, I believe, all the way through the first arc.
Alberto Dose,
okay.
Or Dose or something.
Okay, Dose.
I don't know how to pronounce his last name.
Gotcha. I think his art's really bad. I think his facial expressions are really weird. Just a couple pages in, there's this scene where Wally's coming out from underneath a police car, and like his boss just looks like an evil rat. And so like I was expecting that guy to end up being a villain, and maybe he will be at some point, but not in this book. It's just like a really, really badly drawn facial expression, and just like, it's not that all of it's bad, it's just a lot of it's not good, or I just don't like the look of it, and some of the facial expressions look really off to me. So I really do not like this guy's approach. It almost looks like something out of Archie comics.
Yeah, that's fair. I think what's important about the first artist, Alberto Dose, is that a lot of the story takes place at night, and he does a great job of creating a setting that's so like visually distinct from the Keystone City we're used to. Like at the end of Ignition, which is the first story here. By the way, I love that title for a Flash story. Wally remarks that he almost forgot how bright the city is, and so I think Dose's strength is really getting this almost noirish sort of style going in a Flash book, which is something that you normally wouldn't see, even though I would agree that some of the facial expressions look a little bit off just in their proportions and the foreshortening. But I think that something that has been consistently great about Johns' Flash thus far is the panel structure and the pacing, and I think that still has the same quality to it here.
I'd agree that I think that he does a good job with setting and environment. I think his people are all really, really... I don't think he's used to drawing a lot of people, or at least a lot of dynamic visualization of people. Like, I'm looking at the second issue when Wally starts to run on the airport tarmac, and just that pose is really awkward. And it's like a full page...
agree.
Yeah, it's just a full page spread, and it's just a really unnatural and awkward pose, and I think there's a lot of that in this, where especially, I mean, if you can't draw running, you shouldn't draw the Flash. Every time I see Barry running, the way his body is, or not Barry, Wally running, the way his body's posed is just really awkward, I feel. I don't think he does a good job just drawing people.
That's fair. I think that yes, I would agree, but I think that there's one more thing that shines through his art that I think is really, really bad and gets to a major problem that I have with this run that kind of gets more specific before we talk about the other artists here, is how he draws Linda Park.
Okay.
Because if you look at, I think it's the third issue here or something, the issue that begins with Wally's sort of recollection that it's going in, or no, maybe it has to be later, of him saying it's going in reverse or something like that. With Linda, where he's recollecting on Hunter Zolomon attacking Linda.
Yeah.
The way that he draws her shirt is like completely inappropriate, I feel, because it's like so skin tight that you can see it, like everything there. And if I can find the page and tell you exactly where it is.
Yeah, it's the very first page of the second issue.
Yeah.
That's
and
really
I
weird.
Yeah, and I think it's just really like sexist and objectifying her. And in the last scene,
and especially since it's supposed to be like reliving one of the most tragic moments ever,
right?
And it's really, really awkward.
And the way that he draws her throughout this whole thing, that's just one example, but especially in the last scene that he draws, where she's in like these unnecessarily like short, tight like pajamas or whatever. That just kind of that stuff just upset me on this read through, because
it's just totally it's like not even getting into the whole like objectification of women in comics, but it's just tonally wrong. It's distracting.
And especially because Geoff Johns hasn't done that. Like, none of the artists or his writing have objectified her up until this point, up until in the second issue where they go to buy a new truck, and Linda's talking about how, you know, Wally wants Redder and he's the most stoic man in the world, and he's like, or she married the most stoic man in the world, and he's like, yeah, and I married the most beautiful women. Like, that's just lazy writing, and because it's a man directing it at a woman of color, even though they're married, that stuff just doesn't sit right with me, because Geoff Johns hasn't written these characters like that before, and that seems like a thing of the past for Wally West. And that's something else that we'll get into. But I think that when Howard Porter takes over, who's the other big artist, that issue kind of goes away, even though Linda isn't around and he's not drawing as many women. But when he does draw women, like in the background and with the Justice League, I don't feel that it's,
everything
inappropriate.
Everything about how Howard Porter starts to draw them is just completely different. Like, what's her name? What's Solomon's ex-wife's name? Sarah?
Ashley Zolomon.
Ashley Zolomon is wearing, like, she's supposed to be this police profile detective, and she's wearing like this black cocktail dress in the first story arcs.
Another thing I wanted to bring up too.
And then in the other stuff, she actually, like, just in this, I'm just flipping through, and like you see her meeting with Warden Wolf, and she's got like a long dress, overcoat, blouse with a neckerchief.
It's like overdressed.
Yeah, and it's just like looks much more realistic and appropriate for someone in the job that she has. And it's just it's night and day, man. It's pretty ridiculous how much of a difference it makes. Again, it's just tonal stuff. Like it feels a lot more natural and just it reads better when the art matches the tone of the damn issue.
Yeah, I agree absolutely. I think that Alberto Doce's art, I think, matches the tone, like what I talked about earlier of Keystone being this sort of darker place without the presence of the Flash. But those instances where he draws women in ways that, I mean, I guess it's flattering, but not in an let's just get down. It's kind of like a sexist thing to draw Ashley Zolomon in that cocktail dress when she's at work, when no other women like dress like that. Yeah. And we don't even see other women actually we do, but they're like in the background. And so those instances really took me out of the art and really took me out of the world that they were building because of how unsettling that was.
There's that, and then there's just this underlying fact of I don't really like the direction that they're going in for at least the first story arc. I don't like this reboot. You're right. The sexism of the art is definitely a problem too, but so is just a lot of what they're doing with this, with the direction of the story. So I don't know which is the bigger issue, to be honest with you.
I'm glad you said it, so I didn't have to. Because I've talked about before. I don't know if it's been when we've been recording or with other people or whatever, but I've talked about how I don't care for the decision that Johns makes with these characters in issue 200, but the follow-up makes it almost completely worthless. Mm-hmm. And so when I've gone back to read Blitz after knowing what comes after, it's so frustrating because the bottom line is that making the decision that he made, which is to wipe pretty much every character's memory, halts all the momentum and all the character growth that was supposed to happen in Blitz. And I think that it's appropriate to deal with the fallout of that because we're dealing with the fallout of Zoom throughout this entire book here, which I feel is appropriate. But making that decision stops all the character growth that happened. But in addition to that, even when Howard Porter is on, Johns is writing Wally as a character who doesn't want the legacy of the Flash, as Linda who's blaming Wally for losing their twins even though she knows it's Zoom. Like, it's just all of these characters are like doubling back to the place that they were right after Zoom had killed their twins, which was a place that wasn't really even explored because they had that reconciliation at the end of issue 200 where they were, crying with each other, but they were like not pointing fingers or anything. So it seems like that decision that they made really spun a lot of negative consequences out of it because all the great things that Johns had going for him in terms of his characterization of Wally and Linda and the rest of the Flash family just completely stop.
Yeah, I agree. And I really, really don't like that. That's really aggravating. Johns has this thing of it seems like he doesn't know how to end a story sometimes. And he's always looking out for what's the next big crazy thing he can do to continue it. And so, either Wally has to learn to live with that his lifestyle as a superhero has cost him a real family now, or he has to quit being the Flash is kind of what you're left with at the end of Blitz in book 3. But this whole, it's going to be kind of, half in, half out of, we're just going to reboot the universe so we can focus on this one particular aspect of that character journey. It's so lazy. It's just not a good decision on any level. I really dislike it.
Yeah, I agree. I've warmed up to it a little bit, but I think that's just because I'm trying to view this as positively as I can and view this as a chapter in his ongoing saga of Flash. And so when we get to book 5 in a couple months, I'll be really curious to see how you think he ended that this run off. But that's getting ahead of ourselves. So I think that even though Wally and Linda definitely suffer in this first arc, I think that the stuff that he's doing with the Rogues here is still really interesting, even though the fallout of Blitz has left us with very little panel time with any of the Rogues, except for Captain Cold. Mm-hmm. And I like that because we're sort of doing this soft reboot, I like how much Captain Cold is involved in this, and I like how Wally and Cold interact before they know, or before Wally knows who he's really dealing with. I love those scenes that they have together.
Yeah, I like the idea that they could have been friends. That's a really good one. Like, you think about the way Wally grew up as Kid Flash and became the Flash kind of thing. It makes a lot of sense that that he kind of would have a little bit of a dynamic with Len Snart, as if he's kind of like that drunk uncle kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so just to see them still have kind of that relationship, though they don't recognize it in each other yet, is a really, really neat idea. I like that.
Yeah, and the scenes that they have in the diner, in comparison to the scene where Cold thaws Wally out, it's like night and day. Like Wally's talking down to him. It's black and white. He's a criminal, because at this point Wally thinks that you're either born good or bad. And so I think that Geoff Johns was really smart to include Cold here as sort of a symbol for Wally to recognize that things aren't black and white, that there's a lot of gray area, and that's where the rogues exist. And I think that your point of they could have been friends is so important because of how much he talks down to Cold here. Once he's face to face with him in the Flash costume. And a line from Wonderland, the first arc that Johns did with the Flash, keeps coming back to me, where Wally says Barry called it low self, or Barry called the rogues as having a superiority complex, but Wally thinks it's just low self-esteem. And so it's really interesting to compare, that first, sort of arc where Cold and Mirror Master were really prevalent, to Wally before he gets his memory back, and then, kind of as he's getting memory back with the Flash, and comparing how he relates to Cold and how similar they really are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Now, as we get into this book more, and they start to do more stuff with the rogues, how did you feel about Zoom kind of lingering in the background in this really creepy manner throughout the entirety of the book?
I love it. I love that we're still dealing with the impact of Zoom, and that we didn't say at the end of 200, all right, he's in suspended animation, we're going to leave him alone. No, we're going to force these characters to continue to deal with him and really solidify him as an important, impactful character who's just as important and impactful as Eobard Thawne, if not more so, by having his ex-wife come into the fold as part of as one of the members of the KCPD. But also, I think that it's really appropriate to have her be one of the most emotionally mature people in this sort of dichotomy, because she's the only one who has her head clear and is at the place where Wally sort of gets to at the end of this book, which is that people can be redeemed, people can change, people aren't born good or bad, there is that gray area, and that's what he learns through interacting with Cold here. Although Wally does have that interaction where he says to Ashley that he wasn't a bad man or an evil man, but now he is. And I think that this is kind of a problem with losing all that momentum after issue 200 because of that reset of the memory. These 2 months that have gone by, or 3 months in the story, have gone by, but Wally hasn't had that time with all of his memories to process the grief of what Zoom did to him.
Yeah, it's a really, really just weird-ass decision. And it also makes some of the build-up of what was going on with the rogues and the way Flash was interacting with them kind of spoiled as well, because you get to these scenes where the rogues are trying to get Dr. Alchemy to be on their side and all this stuff, and that just, it starts to feel a little empty. You get some of the stuff with Abracadabra and teaming up with Tar Pit and stuff, and it just feels like a set piece. It doesn't feel like an evolution of these escalating rogues anymore.
I would agree with the fight that happens with Abracadabra, Tar Pit, and the Trickster, but I think that scene with Dr. Alchemy is actually really important, and I think that, at least for me, because Captain Cold has been such an important part of this run, and in this book in particular, that scene didn't lose momentum or anything for me. But you are right that the decision that was made at the end of Blitz had so many ramifications that were negative, because we had to stop what we're doing with the rogues to deal with Wally and Linda getting their memories back. Mm-hmm. Just to jump back to Zoom for a second, I think that it's really great that he gets out of suspended animation, not when his former friend Wally is around, But when Ashley gets into that car accident towards the end here, because he's stuck in that moment of he won't have a gun, trust me, Ashley. And so the only thing that could get him out of that reasonably is his wife being around. And I love the scene at the end of that issue where the two nurses are like, oh, isn't it ironic that, Ashley Zolomon ends up in the same hospital room that Linda Park was in after Zoom killed her twins, which I don't really know what the point of that is. That just seems like unnecessary expositional dialogue. But then this other woman is like, oh, I don't believe in, flying saucers or monsters. And then panel break, and then she says ghosts as you see like a blur of Zoom there. And then they look back and they're like, did you hear something? And then they look back and there's flowers next to the thing, next to Ashley's bedside. And I think that's showing that Ashley may be right, that, Hunter does have, sort of a weak spot. And, that's a good thing. And I like that we're still, that we're still furthering Hunter's character by including his ex-wife in here, and by giving her, sort of the emotional maturity in the relationship, and her in the future she'll be challenging him to sort of, redeem himself.
Yeah, I really like that too. Getting back to the Dr. Alchemy thing, I think that, yeah, you're right. Like, it's still there. It still has the build-up from the other books, but it just feels awkward now because of this break. Like,
that's fair.
Just the way in which Flash had built up a dynamic with rogues where some of them were nicer to him and some of them, like, had a repertoire with him. It feels off now that Wally isn't quite the presence he was anymore. So the way the rogues were teaming up in like these massive, huge teams to try to take Wally down with these really big plans, it just feels smaller now. It doesn't feel like you need these team ups because it feels like Wally has to reprove himself all over again. And that's just why I think it's awkward. One thing that we didn't mention is Johns does his best to try to justify this whole reboot thing. And, like, he does a bunch of the big character reasons and stuff, but then I like the issue with Superman after their race where
Me too.
Wally and Superman are cleaning up, and, like, Wally says that he never got to help clean up his messes before because the people of Central City just wouldn't accept his help in that regard.
Yeah.
And so, like, he really does his best to try to sell it, but it just ultimately doesn't work for me. And it's a real shame because it overhangs a lot of the good that I like in this book anyway.
I know. I completely agree. I think to sort of jump back to what you said earlier about Wally not having a presence with the Rogues, I think you're right in that he's sort of having to prove himself again, and that being unnecessary, given that the first, two arcs of Johns' run with the Flash in Book 1 are about Wally proving himself under the pen of this new writer. But I think that Wally's presence here is focused more so on the other superheroes, like you mentioned with Superman, and the rest of the League and the Titans and the Teen Titans. And I think that that even though there's a lot of stuff that's missing in this run, that and a lot of stuff that was great from Geoff Johns' Flash up until this point that's no longer here or not here right now, I think that it's good that we're finally getting Wally interacting with the rest of the superhero community outside of the Flash family and Hawkman, which are really only the two things that have happened so far. And I think that even though Wally is pretty irredeemably stubborn with the JLA until he has that race with Superman, I think that the key relationships that he has are really cool and really varied in the kinds of relationships that he has, because we have the dichotomy of Flash and Batman, and we get that great flashback scene of him meeting Batman in the Batcave for the first time with Robin. That was a really cool scene. Then we have, and this is in chronological order of them appearing in the book too. Then we have Wally with Hal Jordan as well, who's not happy with the strings being attached and because Hal Jordan is the Spectre right now. He basically says deal with it and poops off.
Yep.
Then we have Flash with Superman, who ends up winning the race, which is really cool and sets a precedent for Flash Rebirth with the Barry and Superman race. And I do love that scene that they share after the race where they're cleaning everything up. And then we have Flash and Nightwing, which is another really key relationship and another thing that ties Wally's days as Kid Flash and as a Teen Titan into this book here. Because Nightwing is one of the last people that he talks to, Nightwing isn't a member of the JLA. He's a member. He's the leader of the Outsiders, former leader of the Titans and Teen Titans, and so that is one of the elements of introducing legacy into this book without necessarily dealing with the Flash legacy in particular, explicitly like we have before.
Yeah, and it's also cool to get the JLA in here, though their issue, that whole issue feels like a lot of padding to me. It feels like everyone's saying the exact same thing until Wally leaves the Watchtower.
Yeah.
But it was cool to see him interacting with all of them, even though he's like, yeah, I'm going, bye. And I'm like, okay, well.
Yeah,
cool.
And that's why I said he's pretty, irredeemably stubborn and he's like that all throughout this book. At first, he's like, I need to tell Linda about my secret, but I need to focus on this case first. And we probably should jump back and talk about Mr. Element at some point. And then when he gets his identity back, he's so confident of being the Flash, but then Linda leaves, and that's another thing we should talk about. And then after she's left, he's a complete mess. He doesn't want, the recognition at the Flash Museum, and then when he's beamed up to the Watchtower at the end of it, he doesn't want to talk to the JLA at all. It's like, dude, you know who these people are. Just talk to them. Mm-hmm. And then he's not having it with Superman, and then it takes Superman calming him down in order for him to go up and deal with this. And so I feel like Wally's characterization is kind of all over the place here. But I like that we're, kind of pairing him up with other heroes of the DC universe, and we're finally making this more of a lived-in, DC universe and not just a Flash universe.
No, I agree with that. And you said you wanted to go back and talk about, the first arc with Mr. Element or whatever it is. Yeah, I liked the reveal that we got a cop bad guy. Again, I guess, because Hunter Zolomon kind of counts, but not really. I don't know, I just like that turn. It's not something that's utilized enough where we have the good guys, quote-unquote, the cops being the villain of the book, so that was enjoyable. I like a lot of what this sets up outside of the whole memory stuff, but again, there's so much of the thing overhangs it. Though I do like the mystery with Dr. Element or whatever it's supposed to be.
Well, it's Mr. Element, and they explain here that Dr. Alchemy used to go as Mr. Element, and he had a weapon that we saw here briefly.
Confused. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that could transmute things, which is kind of like the power that Firestorm has, transmuting matter and energy. Mm-hmm. But then once he found the Philosopher's Stone, he became Dr. Alchemy because he didn't need to rely on technology in order to transmute things. He had the Philosopher's Stone. And we get that little tidbit in the scene where the Rogues are trying to sort of recruit Dr. Alchemy by saying, where Alchemy says that he asked Cole to take care of that Pretender. And so while it would have been cool for Petrov to stick around as sort of like a pseudo Barry Allen for Wally to have to deal with in the future, I think that it's okay that Johns killed him off in the way he did. Because to me, at least, this signals more of Dr. Alchemy being around. And he's a cool villain with some cool powers. And we see even someone who Alchemy views as a pretender use the gun well when he's fighting Wally. There's a lot of cool physics stuff that happens in that scene.
Yeah, turning lead into rain, or rain into lead, that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
I do love the way Captain Cold kills his ass.
I do too.
That's
just the ice shot through his chest.
Yeah, fucking makes Wally watch. That was pretty cool. Just hey kid, I want you to know, Flash, I didn't kill anyone. Zap. now I did.
Yeah.
That's really harsh, and it kind of gives you. And I like the little narration that Wally has there. You're not as smart as you thought, Petrov. You broke a rogue rule. You blamed it on someone else.
Yep.
That's good. I like that quite a bit. That is a solid ending.
I think so too. The rules of the rogues here, that's been a common, not really like a theme, but something that Johns has continued to try to flesh out, and we get another rule in the Mirror Master rogue profile at the end. But we'll get there. What I want to talk about right now is sort of going in chronological order after Wally and Cold, I guess, defeat Petrov. Is Linda leaving? Mm-hmm. And I'm curious what you think about that.
You know, I actually kind of like that because I do like what it does to Wally, but I also like that we have a character who's in a relationship with a superhero and like doesn't want them to change, but also doesn't automatically accept everything about them.
Right.
And is like, yeah, I kind of need some personal time to think through whether or not I want to stay in this relationship. Because, you know, it has cost her something. It's not just that it cost her her twins. The way Johns writes it here, and I know this is not permanent just from other Flash stuff I've read over the years, but the way Johns writes it here, it looks like it's costing her ability to ever have kids.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah, that is a good twist. It's your like kind of over the top melodrama in a sense, but it works in the context of the story. And I really like the way that it's juxtaposed just on the page. You have Barry. I keep wanting to call him Barry. I don't know why. You have Wally finally kind of back to himself, like positive. He's in Keystone City in the daylight, running through the streets. And, like, you get a big full-page spread of that, and then you get Epilogue Part 1, Linda Park West, and she's leaving the apartment. So you have, like, him at the height of the world, and then immediately you see what's going to make him crash again.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I think that her leaving is appropriate. The only problem that I have with it is we don't really even spend that much time with her in this first arc, because Wally's off still kind of doing Flash things and trying to get his memory back, and now she's leaving, and this is like, I mean, again, I get it, like, she needs to leave and have this personal time to deal with this because she's not a superhero, but at the same time, she's not going to be around for any, further characterization to happen. But one thing that I really like about the end of that issue, which is something that Geoff Johns always does well, and this is a formatting thing, this is a pacing thing, and an epilogue thing, which is something that I haven't seen him do, is the first epilogue is with Linda, and the second epilogue is with Ashley.
Yep.
The wives of the Flash and Zoom. I love that, and I love that the end of the epilogue. So those 3 pages are really important because Wally, like you said, is at the top of the world. He's the Flash again. He's confident. Next page, boom, his wife is leaving. And then the last page is the wife of the Reverse Flash trying to return to him after he's killed the children of the Flash and his wife. Mm-hmm. That's really cool.
Yeah, it's a great structural thing to juxtapose the two characters and where their relationships with their significant others are. I do really like that. And then also, just in the trade, this has nothing to do with anything, but fucking goddamn does Michael Turner kill it on these covers.
I know. That's his first cover, I know.
Oh, it's so good. It's like something Alex Ross would do. Shit, that is good.
The anatomy of his figures was something that kind of turned me off at first, but I definitely appreciate his covers here.
They're I guess great. You could say Wally does look a little string beanie, a little too tall, but I don't care. It's the fucking lightning looks fantastic.
And while we're on this sort of part of the book, one other thing that I want to talk about that I feel is and you can correct me on this, is I feel like this is John's voice showing through, not Wally's, is the first couple pages of the next issue where Wally talks shit about the other JLA members.
I feel like Johns likes to do this where he tries to define the characters by juxtaposing them with other characters in the canon. He did the same thing in Green Lantern Rebirth with Batman. where Batman was like really paranoid and stuff about what Hal Jordan as the Spectre was doing and all that.
Which is set up here, which is cool.
Yeah. But like, Jon Stewart gets pissed hearing Batman talk shit about Hal Jordan, so he like turns on the ring and he highlights Batman and he's like, what is Batman to a man without fear? You just hate Hal because you always hated Hal, and like this whole thing. And I'm like, you might be touching on a couple things that are very Batman-ish, but you're still not really being fair to Batman or writing him in character in that scene. And like, so yeah, this first page, I like the way that it tries to frame Wally as a much more down-to-earth, feet-on-the-ground kind of hero, but Wonder Woman preaches to everyone. Really? That's your summation of who Wonder Woman is? Come on. Get that shit out of here.
It's really cheap, and it's an oversimplification of all the characters involved. Because Johns has at one point or another written all of these characters in their own singular books, with the exception of Wonder Woman. But Darkseid War, his last Justice League arc, is pretty much Wonder Woman's story. So I feel like you're right that he's kind of trying to do this to juxtapose characters, but he's doing it at the expense of all the characters that are involved. Mm-hmm. Wally feels like a douchebag saying this about people that he's known since he was 10 years old. Like, he knows Superman. And especially given that we have that arc with Superman later on in the book, like, this feels completely out of character. And there's another thing that really annoys me with him talking about Wonder Woman, and it's the whole saving the environment thing. And Wally says, I'm all for protecting the environment, but as far as I'm concerned, our first priority should be to protect the people. Mm-hmm. And again, I'm not sure if this is John's talking or him trying to talk for Wally. But the thing is, the environment is a people problem. Yeah. And if anyone tried to tell this to me in just a random discussion about the environment and climate change and how to do this, I would tell them that the environment is a people problem, so it should be a priority. And so I feel like that's just a political oversimplification that comes about because of him oversimplifying and making broad generalizations that aren't accurate about the characters in this world.
No, I agree with that. I think to be fair, it does sound very blue-collar, and if you want to set Wally West up as a more blue-collar working man kind of hero, which I actually do really like that he's a mechanic. Me too. I will give a lot of credit for that. I like that he's actually got a job and he's a mechanic, and I like that when he's saving people later in the book, he's like, and I changed the oil just because I could. Like stuff like that. Sometimes I don't understand how that works with super speed, because it doesn't matter how fast you're going, you can't make oil pour faster, but whatever.
But the thing is, he's the Flash who can steal and lend speed.
Okay, good point. All right. So you can if you're Wally West. But anyway, if you want to make a very blue-collar sounding hero, that is a point that sounds very blue-collar, regardless of how true it actually is. I'll give some credit there. That is some shit I can actually... I have actually heard people saying stupid shit like that at work and just out about. I'm more of a, I'm fucking from Indiana. Our senators say stupid shit like, well, caring about the environment's nice and all, but I think we really got to focus on jobs. Well, no one's going to have a fucking job if you're all drowning, so shut the fuck up!
And there are so many jobs in clean energy, man.
Yeah. But anyway, so no, I agree that it's a stupid point, but I don't think of Wally West as a genius. I think of him as occasionally making really stupid points. I grew up watching Justice League, and he would say a bunch of, just dumbass shit from time to time that was very endearing, because it just made him feel like kind of the regular guy on the team who just happened to get superpowers.
That's a really good point. Especially with him being blue collar, what's more blue collar than being a mechanic? Yep. That's something that I really didn't pick up on this reading, that out of all the jobs Johns could have given him, that's the job that he gives him. That's a great stroke of irony.
Mm-hmm. Also, just while we're on this issue at the very beginning, goddamn if I don't love that 2-page title spread though. God, that is gorgeous. Howard Porter really starts to kill it right when he gets on here.
Yeah, I know, and he's the main artist on Joshua Williamson's current Flash right now, and Scott Collins is hopping in here and there. So it's so nostalgic for me to have those guys on the book now, because this is like the second big era of Johns' Flash, because Collins was on the book for a year and a half, and Porter's on the book for a whole nother year, and no other artist has been on the book for that long. So it's great to see the beginning of it here, and I'm glad that you're liking Howard Porter's art. He kills it here.
Oh, definitely. Just like, it's a trick that I always like with the whole tracking the hero kind of thing, where you see him in multiple poses across the page, and then you see him really big. Like that I really like, especially with Flash. It works better with Flash than anyone else. But then just like everything, the lightning coming off the symbol and the yellow on the costume is really cool. It all really works. And then the way the title and credits are given as part of the traffic sign, that's really, really cool. It fits so well. It all fits so well together. It's a very, very well composed image.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I do have one minor nitpick about the suit. And I guess I'll begin with, I like that Wally starts out wearing one of Barry's old costumes. Mm-hmm. I think that that's really cool, as that's part of the reignition of the Flash legacy. But if you look closely, that suit is drawn very classically with the circular, straight belt. But then as soon as Howard Porter jumps on, he's got the triangular or V-shaped belt again. And so I guess we're supposed to assume that Wally used his Speed Force powers to change the belt of the suit, but it's literally like a page turn and the suit's different kind of a thing. And while I like the V belt a lot more, I wish we got like an explanation or a panel of Wally like consciously changing it.
Well, hold on. When Wally starts running around with Porter doing the art, is he still using the ring costume, or is it back to Speed Force Energy costume? Oh yeah, you're right. It's ring.
Well, I think it's both, because in the beginning of that issue that you're talking about, when he runs back into the apartment to find out Linda's gone, we see him in the costume, and then in the next panel, there's like lightning on him, but he's in his civvies. So it's kind of inconsistent, and just because I'm like an art guy and I pay attention to the little details like that, it's something that's kind of bugged me. But I like that we're kind of integrating Flash creating his costume out of the Speed Force with the Flash ring. I like that, even though there are some problems with it being consistent, I like that Johns is trying to combine the best of both worlds with the legacy and the thing that Wally can do. Mm-hmm. I think that's a really respectful thing that shows his reverence for Barry Allen, being that he's his favorite comic character.
Yeah, that's fair. I don't know. I'm of different moods about it, I guess. I don't know. I like this 2-page spread a lot. So
me too.
This gets into the Flash Museum thing that you were talking about. And I don't know, I like the Flash Museum quite a bit. I like that Flash is the character that the city loves enough to give a museum. I don't see that with anyone else. And I like that Wally even mentions that directly. He's like, you don't have a Green Lantern parade or a Batman museum or anything like that, but I have to deal with this, and it just attracts criminals. And he's really bitter about it because it created Zoom.
Right.
Maybe don't let the Flash Museum have the actual artifacts that were used for Supercrime. Just a thought.
Yeah, that's a great point. The Flash Museum literally created Zoom. And I love the new look of it. I love the white marble with the gold and red accents to it. Mm-hmm. I think that's great, even though Wally is again, this is something that just feels kind of out of character with him all of a sudden not wanting the recognition, even though that's not what he sounded like at all at the end of Blitz, when he had just dealt with his kids being gone forever. Yeah. I don't know. I think I'll be a little generous and I'll say it definitely feels conflicted. But yeah, I don't quite care for this decision. Again, I just don't care for the reboot at all. One thing, I'm just flipping through it in the panel where we get the Flash Museum.
You'll notice that there's scaffolding on the left side of the front building. And I think that's the exact spot where Grodd destroys later on in the book. So it's like the last thing finished is the first thing broken in it.
That's pretty funny. While we're on these 2 pages, I want to mention sort of the ongoing thing with the rogues that's happening on the next page with a mysterious blonde character. I wonder who that can be. And James Jesse, who is, as Digger says, a G-man. And so now we're finally getting into kind of a rogue war starting, which is what the last like really big arc Geoff Johns does is going to be about, and we hear the top mention that at the end. How do you feel about the building sort of tension with this other team of rogues sort of in the tail end of this volume working with James Jesse to recruit Murmur and, get better?
I like the idea of doing that. It would just make sense that villains would be squabbling amongst themselves as well as with the heroes, even though the rogues are like traditionally more of the united front of the DC villain universe. But I do like the idea that James Jesse is a G-man. So he's trying to find a way to curb supercrime. So he's starting a war between the criminals, which is like a very illegal police tactic.
Well, and there's a really specific reason why these characters are going at war with one another, which is what you'll find out about in the next book. Because book 2 was really rogue heavy and about like the different incarnations of the rogues, and we've kind of taken somewhat of a backseat to that. There haven't been as many major developments in books 3 and 4. But it's been like a continuing thing, and I hope that you really like the conflict between the rogues, because it's something that pulls in a lot of Flash history, a lot of Rogue history, and a lot of conflict between characters that, like you said, are supposed to be the one team in the DC universe that can actually get along. And something that's really interesting, that's important to kind of put a timestamp on this, is that Heatwave just turned 40. And that's just kind of a minor detail, but I think is a really appropriate one, given that Wally is probably like 27 or 28 here, and Bart is probably 16 or 17. And so it would make sense that, Wally started being Kid Flash at 13. Barry was at least like 24 or 25. So, and all the rogues were around the same age. So it would make sense that the rogues are like in their late 30s, early 40s, as Wally is sort of getting into his main career as the Flash. I really like that attention to detail.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so like the Abracadabra fight and with Jay and Bart showing up is pretty cool. I liked it. I don't know what it is, man. Something about Tar Pit really gets me. I really like Tar Pit. I really want like a Tar Pit Clayface team up. That'd be cool. Muck and Tar. That's what we'll call that. Get on it, Jake. You just draw it. I'll do the Stanley and I'll just throw in the dialogue.
That fight that they have is really cool, and I love the way that he writes Bart here. But there is another sort of inconsistency thing, because Bart is Kid Flash now, and the last time we saw Bart, he was Impulse and going off with the Teen Titans. So, in case you haven't read Geoff Johns' Teen Titans, Bart becomes Kid Flash in that book, and Wally is around and sort of pushes him to become Kid Flash, but in true Wally West fashion, it's not some inspirational thing like Barry would say. Wally's a bit of a dick to him, and that's what forces him to become Kid Flash. But in that story, which is being published between the Flash 200 and 208 or 209, which is where we see Bart as Kid Flash again, Wally has his memories there, so I'm not sure when that's supposed to take place in the timeline. And it kind of stinks that Bart makes a transition into Kid Flash outside of the Flash book, because Wally even remarks that he wasn't sure if Impulse was ready to be a member of the Flash legacy. But I'm really glad that he's here now, and I'm glad that Geoff Johns was the one who handled that transition, because he writes their relationship so well. Like, there's that one line about school, and he's like, "Oh, you don't enjoy school," to Bart, and Bart's like, "No, did you?" And he's like, well, I guess not. And Jay's like, "Please don't encourage him."
Yeah, it's fun. It's really fun. You definitely feel the family dynamic still, even though it's supposed to be kind of weird right now. So that was good, and I like that, you know, Jay and Bart are kind of bickering about the whole school thing, where it's like, I know all this stuff already. You crammed. You didn't learn. Like, that's really good. A lot of the stuff, yeah, it's fun. I like the Flash Museum tour as well. That's pretty cool. The Justice League have just, like, really dickish timing, and they probably shouldn't just be able to teleport people whenever the fuck they feel like it. But, you know.
Yeah, that seems like an oversight and too much power, but that's something that we're gonna get into, because Identity Crisis is the one. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, it's fucking Identity Crisis. Right after the League is bitching to Wally about the fact that Spectre erased all their memories without their permission. How are you guys pissed?
That's a really good point, and I was gonna bring that up to say that like Flash has a really big part in Identity Crisis because of the secret of Barry Allen. So that's a really good point to point out the hypocrisy here. I wonder if Wally will say anything to them about their hypocrisy in the future.
Nah, Identity Crisis is just like the worst event. People bitch about the Superboy punch. Identity Crisis is dumb. Christ. Anyway. So then we get the JLA issue, which, like, I like the idea of Wally confronting the JLA. It's just kind of superfluous. Everyone's just saying the same thing, so, and we already talked about that a little bit. But I really like the Superman thing. It's a race around the world where I actually believe that both of them are really trying to give it, if not their all, Wally is trying to outrun Superman while still being able to check on something else.
And he does. He's successful.
Yeah, that was just cool.
And it's great that he has that line. And I love how detailed Geoff Johns is with the powers of, if Wally were to steal his speed, it would be like, what does he say, like a 1-ton truck or something? Mm-hmm. Where is it? I could steal all of Superman's kinetic energy and stop him cold, but it would be like throwing him out of a car, one moving over 200,000 miles a second, because of how much momentum behind he has behind his speed.
Yep, that's a really cool twist on the things. I really like that we firmly established in the comics that not only is Flash faster than Superman, Flash can completely destroy Superman.
Oh yeah.
In a race or anything like it. It's just like, not even Superman flying is going to make the difference. The only reason Clark's not flying here is because he's trying to carry on a conversation.
Right.
So I like a lot of this. This is pretty good.
Yeah, did you pick up on that little detail with the turtle in that issue?
In what regard?
So what happens is that as Superman and Wally are racing around the world, they run past Iron Heights, and that's the sort of jumpstart that the turtle talks about in that last issue, about like jumpstarting his powers. So like an inconsequential thing of like a seemingly inconsequential thing of Wally and Superman racing around the world has that, you know, serious consequence of giving the turtle the means to escape Iron Heights again at the last issue.
Yeah, no, I quite liked that. I noticed that they ran past Iron Heights and that we got like a panel. I just didn't notice like what that was going to be about, but when it got revealed later on in the issue and everything, I thought that was pretty cool.
That's cool.
Yeah, and again, I also really like the race is fun and cool and fine and all. What really does it for me is this scene with them just in the civvies after the fact, you know?
Yeah.
That's the thing that really makes it work for me. And then there's Wally going around to everybody else, which is kind of cool. And I like that we established that he's got a relationship with Dick Grayson in particular. Mm-hmm. That's a neat idea, and that they talk about, oh, I'm going to have my own trophy collection one day. And, like, seriously, Wally fucking has his own museum.
Yeah. That's a great point, and that gets back to what I was saying earlier about sort of reestablishing Wally's connection with the heroes of the greater DC universe. And it's so fitting that Nightwing is one of the characters that we spend the most time with, because Wally and Dick were best friends during the Teen Titans. And it's so interesting that even though Barry is, living on in everyone's memories, that the two people that he sort of works with the most and draws from the most are Superman and Nightwing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I like that quite a bit. I also like that, like, Wally's thinking about why he's not talked to Dick as much, and it's because the writers forgot that they had a relationship. But I like the excuse that Geoff Johns gives, where he's like, oh, well, you just grow apart, and I realized that I got married and he didn't, and that's kind of what really set our lives in different directions. So it's a nice, believable thing. I like that. That was pretty good. What else happens? Oh, let's talk about Ashley Zolliman's car.
Yeah.
I don't know how I feel about that. Because, like, there's other stuff. There's Heatwave and there's the Penguin, and I just don't find that particularly interesting. But the idea of Ashley Zolliman's car getting wrecked and it being Wally's fault, I found really interesting.
Really interesting, or you didn't care for it? Because you said two different things. Both?
It's not that I didn't care for it. It is a bit cheap on the writing aspect, but at the same time, I don't know how much of it could have been Wally internalizing a lot of anger at her and Hunter. And, like, maybe it's, like, one of those subconscious things.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how that's going to go.
I mean, I think that him saying that he put it down for a second when he went off to go do his Flash stuff, I think is a genuine enough response. And to be honest, so I started collecting some of the last issues of Johns' Flash before I knew that the books were coming out. And the issue that's directly after the last one in this book that deals with Wally and Ashley Zolliman and her getting better is like the one issue out of like Johns' run from 200 to 225 that I haven't read yet. So I don't know how that's going to resolve. And so that's something that I'll be reading for the first time with you as well in book 5.
Okay.
So I don't know how that's going to turn out, but I think right now I'm not necessarily against it, because I think that even though, she's hurt and it's an avoidable thing and it may be completely stupid and I may, feel that way throughout the whole thing, I think that it's just a way of Johns trying to deal with or trying to force Wally to deal with not being friendly with Ashley Zolliman because of what her husband did, without having Wally go through some superfluous character arc, because all throughout this book, Wally is super stubborn and doesn't want to change. So I don't think he would even think about giving Ashley the benefit of the doubt or really care about her and be compassionate like the Flash is supposed to be, unless something really bad happened to her. And I like that it's his fault, and so he's kind of in the same place that Zoom was in the end of book 3, where he's responsible for like a severe event of someone getting hurt in the opposite person's marriage, even though it wasn't like an intentional thing. I like that we're continuing to parallel those two characters.
Yeah, I agree. I like that aspect of it, and again, I thought it was a really cool twist on that stuff, that Wally is actually to blame for something like this. I thought that was pretty good.
What do you think about Grodd?
I like the Grodd fight. I don't know why he keeps getting brought back to Iron Heights. That just seems like a really bad idea, because it did not work out well the last time.
Right.
But here he is. They got a valve hooked up to his heart that's going to make him bleed out if he tries to escape. Wow. Okay.
That's talk about like brutality and stuff in prisons. Like, that seems a little bit like overkill, but then again, Wolf is the one running it, and he was there when Grodd broke everyone out, and he was friends with Hunter Zolliman during that event, and then Hunter got his back broken by Grodd, so it's kind of overkill, and if that were to happen in real life, I would totally be against that. But I guess it makes sense in the context of the story. And I think that the Grodd fight itself is really cool, but another thing, just like a detail of the timeline of things that doesn't really make sense. The last time we saw Grodd, he was being held captive in Gorilla City, and there's something that he makes. There's some comment he makes about Nightwing in the issue before they actually fight about him being humiliated by the outsiders. So there must have been something that went on between the last time we saw Grodd and him appearing here. But if there wasn't, I'm not really sure how he got out of Gorilla City and returned to Keystone and is just lurking inside the Flash Museum without anybody noticing.
Yeah, that's weird. Grodd's, like, really violent. John does a really good job to show you why Grodd is, like, a serious threat, because it just takes the infinite mass punch to be able to defeat him. And that's a good way to break your fingers. So that was pretty cool. I like seeing Nightwing deal with it. Like, what was this line? Can you stay alive for another 7 seconds? Maybe even 8. Great. Like, that was really good banter.
Yeah, that was a really good moment.
So yeah, it's a fun issue. It's a supervillain fight kind of thing. I don't really have too much to say about it. One thing I like at the end of it, where we see what cell Zoom's being held in, his door has a Z.
Yeah, that was a
that's
really nice detail.
Yeah, and I gotta wonder if Wolf is just being a bit of a dick or not. It's hard to tell.
There's one little thing that we haven't talked about yet before we get to the last couple issues, and that's Murillo and Shire not really being present. I may have said this the last time we talked, but issue 200 is really like when we kiss the Flash, the Team Flash of this run goodbye, because Wally isn't working with Shire and Murillo or Hunter, or I guess it would be Ashley now, in the KCPD trying to crack these road cases. These guys just kind of appear sporadically to sort of clean up after the Flash.
Yeah, that's a little disappointing. I also don't like the way they just talk to Barry, or goddamn, I keep doing it, to Wally as he's been arrested. Like, they just, why'd you do it, Wally? Like, come on. There should be something else to this relationship, and it's just not there. It just feels really awkward. They feel like generic cops now. They don't feel like actual characters anymore, and that's disappointing.
Yeah, it's really disappointing, because I love Shire and Murillo, and it would seem like they remember everything that happened before the mind wipe, except that they just didn't know who Wally was. So, like, what? I don't know. I just wish that we got more time spent with these characters. Even though I like Wheeler and his daughter and the voices that they have for them, it's just kind of upsetting to see these characters sort of not being present, or present but not prevalent anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's talk about the Rogue profile then, because this is the Mirror Master one. Now, it was Grant Morrison that made Mirror Master Scottish, right?
Yep.
But that wasn't in the run he did with Millar that we reviewed. When did that happen?
I think it was probably during his JLA run, to be honest. Because isn't Mirror Master part of the Injustice gang?
I assume so. I don't really know. Okay, so that would make sense then. If I was just curious when that happened, because I was like, wait, when did Mirror Master become Scottish?
Well, he didn't become Scottish.
No, I meant, like, when did we make a Scott Mirror Master, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That was, yes, I admit that was a bad way of phrasing that.
No, that's okay, because I just didn't want to confuse people, because Sam Scudder was the original Mirror Master, and he ended up dying, and we get an explanation here for how he sort of became... Yeah, I'm reading right now, and it said that he's a member of Lex Luthor's Injustice gang. So that's probably during the first 1 or 2 arcs of Morrison's JLA, right?
Maybe. It's definitely not in
Rock
it's
of
definitely
Ages.
not in the first arc. I'll tell you that much. I'm gonna be reviewing that, so I'll let you know if that comes up in there.
Yeah.
But anyway, so like the rogue profile here is just like Geoff Johns just having too much fun with the serial killer tropes. Like, you get these tropes in, like, all the TV shows of, like, this really dark thing happened to this character as a child, and that's what made them the serial killer for this episode. And, like, this is just the exact same thing. Oh, Mirror Master was almost raped as a child in an orphanage, but he killed the bully, and that's what made him into a hitman. And I'm like, oh, okay then.
Yeah.
That's pretty fucked up. Oh, no, it gets worse. He became a hitman, and he killed his father on contract without realizing it. And then he went to go talk to his mom, and she killed herself. And I'm just like, well, that's fucked up.
I know. And again, Geoff Johns is a master of these rogue profiles. We talked last time about how he integrates these small motifs into these rogue profiles and how these motifs get blown up into who these characters are and what defines them as rogues. And after all of those traumatic events you listed, he's always looking back into the looking glass. Mm-hmm. And it's so it's so fitting that Johns was able to work retroactively with this Scottish character and integrate that mirror motif and the looking glass thing into his origin. I love that.
Mm-hmm. It's really good. It's just really, really solid that he keeps looking at himself in the mirror, and seeing all these things, and like that's just it's really, really twisted. I also like that he becomes kind of a drug addict because of this. Like, we see him just doing cocaine off of a mirror at the end of the issue. Though I will say, whoever's doing the art on this issue, he does kind of make Mirror Master look a little too young once he takes his costume off. I thought that was odd.
It's the hair.
Yeah, and then, like, seriously, in the next issue, he doesn't look that young. It's weird. Stephen Cummings. No, but I like that he's, like, doing the drugs off the mirror in the rogue's bathroom. I ain't ever leaving Wonderland. That's good.
And that line is super important because Wonderland was, again, the first arc of Johns' run, and that was a world without the Flash. So just in that final page spread, there's so much symbolism with his line, I ain't ever leaving Wonderland. He's choosing not to leave that world. He doesn't want a world where the Flash exists, but it's a world that he created and he has godlike control over. But then he's doing cocaine off the mirror, which is, again, a repeating motif in him killing people and being an assassin throughout his whole life. This rogue profile, even though it kind of felt like short to me, was really traumatic, as it usually is, and fit pretty much, and not just fit, but excelled in all the areas that Johns usually does, which is incorporating these small motifs and building these characters out of it. Yeah,
I really like that. And then I like as you get into the next issue, how it goes. I love
the opening.
Yeah, it just completely backfires on his ass, and you just have Cold kick the shit out of him.
He says, do you want to make your nose bleed? Let's do it the old-fashioned way. I fucking love Captain Cold. He's so good.
Yeah, it's a really, really great intro. He just kicks the shit out of him. He's like, no drugs. You're a good rogue, McCullen. Better than Scudder ever was. But I need you sharp, understand? So say it, Cold. Say it. No drugs. Like, Mirror Master is just objectively, like, 10,000 times more powerful than Captain Cold as far as, like, the range of what his suit lets him do. And yet Cold is so goddamn intimidating here. It's really cool. It's like, I can create parallel realities and control them. Well, I can kick the shit out of you and then freeze your corpse. So there.
I think that it's great that Cold has a legitimate reason for having that policy. This is something that we briefly kind of talked about earlier with the rogues having these rules, this code, and Johns does a great job of justifying why the rogues have this code at all.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I really like that. It's just solid. It's really well written. That's all it comes down to. Man, that's a really great intro. And then we get the turtle. I don't know. I like the way that, like, Wally just has to deal with this shit right in the middle of an interrogation, because it kind of calls back to what he'd mentioned about how He would sometimes just kick into super speed mode and not be able to control it. So I really like that. Like that's what he thinks is happening at first, and then all this stuff with the turtles shows up, and that's pretty fun.
I think that while it's definitely fun, and I enjoyed reading it, even though it's kind of implied that that the turtle is trying to quote unquote play with the kids, and by play I mean molest them, and I don't know really how I feel about that. Even though I'm not against dealing with these sort of serious real life situations.
Thanks for saying it that way. I was really afraid you were about to say, even though I'm not against molesting children. That would have been the worst way to phrase that.
Even though I'm not against dealing with these kind of issues, even though that's an objectively bad thing, none of the other. I mean, we just saw in the previous issue, like all the Playboy magazines inside the Rogues' bathroom. So, clearly the Rogues aren't exactly upstanding moral citizens when it comes to respecting women and having sex appropriately. But that detail was kind of like, oh, that's really interesting. I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to take away from that thematically, because the fight with the turtle, although really cool, and Wally using his powers here is really cool, and how he defeats the turtle, I'm not really sure what thematic significance there is to dealing with a dude who can steal and lend speed, which is a power Wally already has, and dealing with a dude that's, trying to molest kids now that he's slowed everything down.
I don't know. I think it's maybe just to make him more of a creeper, because he already looks really fucking creepy. Is it a costume, or is it just that's the way his skin looks or something? I don't know.
With his face, that's just how his skin looks, but I think that's just his costume.
Okay. I don't know. I feel like this motif works better with Mad Hatter, of Mad Hatter being a pedophile.
That's true.
That's one thing I always really liked about Morrison's Arkham Asylum, is the implication that Mad Hatter was kind of like a cross between a pedophile and Charles Manson.
Yeah.
But here it seems like just a thing to make him creepier, and honestly, I didn't even pick up on that. And as soon as he said that, I'm looking at the way he's saying, and I can play, I'm like, oh yeah, obviously, Ian, that's what he was talking about. How did I miss it? I don't know, but yeah, it's creepy as shit. And I don't know, the steal and take speed, I think he's just trying to... Johns does this occasionally with characters. He just tries to give them a new bag of tricks because no one uses them. When was the last time you read a Flash story with the turtle?
Yeah, and that's a good point. And even though I'm not really sure how this is supposed to be a thematically significant event in Wally's career as the Flash, this is definitely the strongest interpretation of the turtle, and definitely the most powerful. And I wish that we would go back to using a character like this, because some of the Golden Age rogues, like the Turtle, the Fiddler, and the Shade, are really underused, even though I really love the stuff that we're doing with the Silver and Bronze Age rogues.
Yeah. And I mean, it's definitely telling that John's just trying to reinvigorate the character and give him, just a bag of tricks for writers to use. Because while Wally can steal and lend speed, Barry can't, right?
Yeah.
So then how the fuck does Barry deal with this guy if we use him again?
Yeah, you're exactly right.
There's this line here that I really like, where I think it is John's kind of showing his hand. He was balding when Jay used to fight him in the 40s. The turtle's metabolism is slow, like his mind. Worst power ever. Jay said he used to feel sorry for him. Sometimes he'd let the little guy get in a punch or two before hauling his butt off to jail. Yeah, it's kind of just showing, yeah, this guy's kind of pathetic, so here's my chance to try to reignite him, use give him some cool stuff that he can do. And that's
actually,
fine.
Now that I think about it, if Geoff Johns had continued writing The Flash, if the New 52 hadn't happened, or happened in the capacity that it did, the title of the turtle would have been a really, really important thing. So I'm really glad now that I've sort of made that connection of knowing what's going to happen in the future, hint, hint, wink, wink, that he got the chance to reinvigorate the character here. and give him sort of a stable power set and not just say, oh, he's super slow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's cool. I don't know. It's just an okay issue. Again, I like the line where he's like, I changed the oil just because I can, as he's fixing everything. It's a little weird that he does that when he's got to go back and go back to interrogation, but eh. And then, we get the Hunter scene that we already talked about and the reveal that Wally did screw up and Ashley's in hospital because of him, so...
Mm-hmm.
I think we've talked about literally everything that's happened in this book.
I think so, too.
I just want to say one more time, Michael Turner's covers are absolutely incredible. Like, there's the first time he does the one of just Barry, or goddamn Wally. That's really, really cool. I also like the one where it's Wally in front of a bunch of the rogues. Like, he even makes Murmur seem to fit in a little bit better, which I've talked about how Murmur feels more like a Batman villain than a Flash villain.
Yeah.
But man, do I love that cover where it's got like Zoom behind him. You got Cold, you got Grodd, you got Weather Wizard. That's a really cool one.
I know. I love that cover too. I love how Zoom is placed like behind Wally, but he's sort of like coming out of the yellow highlights of the suit. Mm-hmm. And I love how he's there with those fingers, waiting to snap.
Yep. I was about to mention that too. Yeah, it's really cool. Murmur's got like the thing going. I'm surprised Murmur is so prominent compared to like Grodd and Cold and everybody, but I guess this issue does start to mention him and all that stuff. So that was pretty cool. I like Turner's covers quite a bit.
Me too. Lastly, what do you feel about, or not what, but how do you feel about the Topps little 2-page stint here trying to get in with the Rogues?
I'll just have to see what it develops into before I really have much of a take on it, I think. I did remember something else I wanted to mention when we were talking about Turtle being like a pedophile. I didn't realize that Girder's origin was he tried to rape someone.
Yeah.
So I guess we're just kind of, we're willing to venture into that level of crime for some of these villains, which I'm okay with that. I'm okay with having villains be bad people.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I just remember a couple years back, like there's the cover, like everyone was getting really shitty with the cover of Joker and like Batgirl, and they're like, oh, it's treating him like sexy, but Joker essentially raped Barbara Gordon and all this stuff, and so that's just wrong. And I'm like, guys, Joker's a bad person. I don't understand what the issue is here.
Right. Right.
So yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm somewhat like, as long as it's handled tactfully, I'm okay with it. Maybe it'd be better if a female writer were to handle the more rapey villains, but yeah, whatever. Since they have a unique perspective on it, but we'll see. I guess with Mirror Master almost being raped as a child and the Turtle being a child rapist, at least desiring to be one, maybe they'll do something with that. Or not. Probably not.
Maybe an identity crisis.
Yeah, right? So I don't know. I did like this quite a bit. I've been enjoying this. I think I might end up picking up Wade's run too once we're all done. We'll cover this in the most back and forth manner conceivable, but whatever. All right, I think that's going to do it. We need to go on and do a rating. So despite the stuff I really do like about this, there is no denying that the reboot nature of it really overhangs and just ultimately feels unnecessary. Mm-hmm. So I think I'm going to give book 4 3 out of 5 flash rings.
Wasn't the last time we did this, wasn't it out of 4?
No, it's always out of 5 scale.
Oh, well, I'm just an idiot. So I'm going to give this probably a 3 out of 5 as well. I was planning on giving this a 3 out of 4. I don't know if I just remembered the ratings wrong or whatever. I don't know what's going on.
You mean you don't watch all 550-something odd episodes of Geeky Gentlemen on a religious basis so that you learn and memorize every single way we do things? Get the fuck out. You're not a true fan.
Well, in that case, I'm just going to retroactively say that I'm going to give book 3 a 5 out of 5, and I'm going to give this a 3 out of 5. Book 4 a 3 out of 5. Just because you're absolutely right. Like, the
3
first
out of 5
part,
what? 3 out of 5 what? You gotta have a noun.
Snapping.
Okay.
Snapping, because all we're doing is, at least for the first 8 issues, is dealing with the aftermath of that snap.
Nice. All right. Okay, cool. Well, Jake, I'll see you next time for book 5, and then we'll figure out how we want to cover the Barry Allen stuff.
Yeah,
Sound
I'm looking
good?
forward to it.
All right. Until then, everyone, thanks very much for watching. I'm the Philosopher.
And I'm the artist.
And we are your Geeky Gentlemen. And we will be discussing things.